Good morning, JCA. It is week 7. I am so excited about all the progress that we have already made. If we think back, I know I review it every single week, but thinking back to all of the new habits that you've included, it's been absolutely amazing that you've started to include more fruits and vegetables, more variety, more vitamins and minerals, different vitamins and minerals maybe than you were used to getting before. Maybe you're getting used to, having a couple more hours in between meals where you're not snacking. And obviously the end goal is for your health to improve. So I would love to hear if you're starting to notice any changes, if you're noticing that you're feeling a little bit more energetic at the end of the day, or maybe your mood is a little bit happier, or maybe something that used to be bothering you is not any longer bothering you. Hey, good morning, Paula and Deb. Thanks for joining. So let me know if you're starting to notice any physical or mental or health benefits from all of the amazing new habits that you've included. And good morning, Allison and Ken. And also I would love to reflect a little bit on some of the habits that were a little bit more challenging for us and the ones that were a little easier. Everyone has a different one. Some people, I get all different feedback each week about which one was harder for some people and which one was actually really easy. So think about those more challenging ones, and those might be the ones that you should really focus on, because even though they're challenging, they are still super important for your health and your long-term, health goals, quality of life, and things like that. So even if they were, some of them, a little bit more challenging, those might be the ones that you really want to really try hard and focus on and try to include and implement in your life. So this week's challenge is a really fun one, and it may seem like it's a little contradictory to some of the things I've already said, but I want to really explain my intention here. So the challenge this week is to take a sweet food or a dessert that you would normally have eaten prior to all of these weeks and change around the recipe, or maybe search for a recipe where it's all of a sudden, instead of being in a guilty, a dessert that makes you feel guilty, or there's calories and sugar and white flour and things in it that maybe in the past you would have, eaten and felt bad about. Change the recipe, see how you can adjust it to using the more healthy sweeteners that I've discussed before. Maybe using oats instead of white flour, or almond flour, coconut flour instead of the white flour. See what you can do to the recipe to make it something that's now a really healthy part of your life. Now, the reason why that might sound contradictory is because in the past I've said, try not to snack and try to avoid eating in between meals and, having your 10 to 12 hours over the night. And I absolutely still stick to that 100%. Please try to include that habit in your lifestyle. However, there is always a place for sweetness, right? We want to enjoy our food and we want to look forward to something sweet at the end of our meal. So I'm going to tell you a couple of places. Good morning, Nancy. Thanks for coming. A couple of places in your schedule where a sweet dessert might fit perfectly in. And I don't even know if you want to call it a dessert, but it's something sweet, let's say. That might be, number one, right at the end of your meal. So like at dinner, sometimes right at the end of dinner, you feel like you're kind of craving just this little sweet end to the night, right? So just include it in your meal, and then you still make sure that you're done eating by a specific time in the night so that you have 10 to 12 hours until you eat again. So you absolutely can have something sweet at the end of your meal. It absolutely fits in. My recommendation recommendation to you would be to try to pick something sweet that doesn't include white sugar. So instead has something like honey or maple syrup or molasses or dates or date syrup or even some stevia extract. Those are my favorite sweeteners. So try to, if you're gonna have something sweet, use those instead of white sugar. Secondly, try to include fruits or or cacao with like a high percent, like chocolate with a high percent cacao. So I always recommend above 70% cacao. So those foods actually have health benefits. They're not just calories, they're not just there to make your food taste good. Cacao is especially healthy for you. It actually has the same ingredient in it that is found in green tea, which we've all heard is really healthy for us. It's a good antioxidant. Cacao is also good for our cognition. There's some ingredients in there that's good for brain health. So by switching over, just making those few tweaks in the recipes, you absolutely can include these types of foods in a healthy diet. The other time where a snack like this might work out is right before your exercise. So if you're going to be doing, an hour's worth of a workout, then you absolutely may want to have some type of fuel that you take in a little bit before your exercise so that you can really stay energized throughout your entire workout. Now, the reason that I have recommended to avoid snacks in between meals is because normally snacks are high in carbohydrate, and carbohydrate all on their own, by themselves, when they're eaten alone, they trigger that insulin response. And insulin is the hormone that tells sugar to go into your body cells, which is fine because you don't want sugar to stay in your blood, because then you get that high blood sugar, which is an example or a symptom of diabetes. But the other thing that insulin does is that it tells your cells to store fat. So every time that insulin is triggered, it could lead to more and more fat storage in your body. So the fewer times that we can trigger insulin throughout the day, the better. That's why I always say, let's try not to snack. Let's try to avoid carbohydrates by themselves with no other food with them. Those are all things we want to avoid. However, another thing that inhibits insulin besides fasting is exercise. So if you're about to exercise and you have a little snack to fuel you, then the insulin will not be triggered. As soon as you begin exercising, insulin goes away. So that's another time. So if there's times during the day where I think a snack might be appropriate or more appropriate than another time, it would be right after a meal, so included in your meal almost, rather than all by itself in between your meal. And secondly, right before you're about to exercise. But then thirdly, make sure that the snack itself is not a snack that is just pure white sugar or other ingredients that your body would, not recognize, like, the added ingredients that you see on labels that you don't recognize, other things that cause inflammation. So I hope that all makes sense. Basically, we are still avoiding our snacks in between meals, but there's a time for sweetness, and I would say that would be right along with your meal, or if you're using it as something right before your workout, and make sure that the snack itself is on the more healthy side. So the challenge this week is to take a recipe that you would normally have eaten before, a cookie, a brownie, something like that, and tweak the recipe. If you need my help, I certainly am more than happy to help you, but you also can Google recipes, more healthy. Sometimes if you use the search terms gluten and dairy free, brownie or cookie or whatever, you'll see options, or even sugar free. and instead of using like sugar alternatives, like the sugar alcohols that you might not know of or heard of, or it sounds like a chemical, try the sweeteners that I've already mentioned, like honey, maple syrup, molasses, dates, or stevia extract. Those are the options that I would recommend. So I'd love to see your recipes this week of your new sweet dessert or food that you're eating. Include seeds and nuts and cacao and so many good ingredients that are healthy for you, that now you can eat these things and not feel guilty, not gain weight from it, and not trigger that insulin response, which we're trying to avoid if we could. Okay, so what I'm making this week is, I call them kind of like energy balls, like raw. They're so easy because I'm just going to be pulsing them together in my food processor, my blender over here, and that's really all. It's not going to take baking, it's not going to take cooking, it's pretty easy. I will say in advance that it's the first time that I've done it with this machine, which is my Instant Pot blender, which I've talked about before. It's an awesome machine if you've missed my conversation on it, because not only does it blend nut butters and nut milks and all kinds of things, but it also heats up, so I could actually make soup and things that are warm in here. What was the other thing I was going to say about it? And the other thing is that it's glass, which I love, because if I am heating something up in here, then you'd want to avoid plastic, and that's exactly why I bought it. So anyway, it's the first time I'm making these energy balls in here, so I'm really hoping that it works out. It'll be an experiment. If it doesn't work out, then don't use this machine, but the recipe is great and you could use another machine. Good morning, who's that? Renee, I see you. Let me see. Yes. Oh, it's on sale. Thank you. That's awesome to hear. This is on sale, supposedly. Where did she say? Amazon. Awesome. So if you get it, let me know if you like it. I've been loving it. I use it almost every single day. I even use it for my coffee. I do like coffee, and coffee can be included in a healthy lifestyle for sure. And I use it when I make my coffee. I do add a little MCT oil, which I could talk about another time, but that's it's a medium chain triglyceride fat. So it's kind of like a pre-digested fat. It's already broken down into the smaller pieces, and your brain can actually use it, so it's good for your cognition. So I add it to my coffee with even sometimes a little bit of cacao powder, or I have a protein powder that's chocolate flavored. You know I love chocolate. And I blend that all together with my nut milk creamer, and I get this like delicious foamy coffee. I know that sounds amazing. I probably should have done that on one of my challenges. It is amazing and I love it, and I use this every day for that, and I bought this because it's glass and I could use hot coffee and not worry that I'm getting plastic in my coffee. Okay, so, I didn't realize that I left this here, so it's a little messy. Okay, so what I have in here already is a cup of pulsed. I just used the pulse setting on here to pulse some almonds and flax seeds. So I have a cup of that. I used the pulse, and I'll just do that again actually, just because I want it to be a little bit more, let's see, cancel all this. I just want it to be really ground really well. Okay, that's perfect. And I've already talked about this before, but this includes my flax seeds, which I talked about last week, including more and more seeds in your diet, but you could absolutely use for this recipe sunflower seeds or sesame seeds or whatever type of seeds that you like. I used a combination of almonds and that, but you can even change the nuts if you want to use pecans or cashews or whatever you like. There's a cup of that, and then I'm going to be adding some vanilla extract, some cacao powder, and I've already discussed with you the benefits of cacao, which is that it has that same antioxidant that is found in green tea, and I love the smell. The second you open it up, it smells so good. So about a quarter of a cup of cacao powder. Okay, and then I just need about a teaspoon of vanilla extract. You could even use, if you prefer the taste of almond extract, then you can absolutely use that. I love that. Okay, but make sure you like it first, because not everybody does. Some people have like sort of a weird little thing about almond extract. And then just a tiny bit of salt. And I'm gonna mix that all together. And then I have already chopped is a whole cup of dates over there. Let me just get all this together. Okay, I think I could pulse that again. Let's see, I think I'm gonna blend it. There we go. And the recipe did say that you may have to scrape it a little bit to make sure that everything, I think I'm gonna do that. Okay, perfect. Okay, so far so good. The next part is the part that I'm a little worried about, and that's the part where I add the dates, and I'm only gonna add them a little bit at a time with a little bit of water. And the point is obviously that this is gonna get to be, you know, kind of like all mushed together so that I can make balls out of them. But those are gonna be really delicious. So dates, I've talked about before, are good for your bones. So eating a date per day, or even a couple of dates per day, can really help strengthen your bones if you're at all worried about your bone density. So women especially, after menopause, when we lose some of our estrogen, that is when we are at higher risk for things like osteoporosis and osteomalacia and things like that. But really, we should be thinking about this way before menopause, because our bones are growing, are still becoming more dense up until we're about 30 years old. So really we should be, you know, maximizing how strong our bones are much earlier in life, because at some point they don't become any more dense, and then after menopause is when it starts to get weaker, a little bit weaker and weaker. So we really should be thinking about this our whole entire lives. However, if you're already at an older age or in menopause or after menopause, we can still help. We can slow the deterioration by eating foods that can strengthen our bones. Okay, so you can see I'm putting this off because I'm really nervous this is not gonna work. But we'll see. I warned you in advance, this is an experiment. So a little bit of water, and I'm just gonna slowly add in these dates. Okay, let's cross our fingers for this. Let's see, I'll try this one. Okay, seems to be going. And it's normal for it to, like, it goes on and off. When you pick certain of these settings, like smoothie, for example, it like sort of pulses. So it's normal that it's like stopping after a second. Don't worry about that. Okay. So I think I can add a little bit more. I think I'll actually just add them all in at this point. The other thing that dates are good for is they balance our hormones. So that's another thing that if you're, you know, in perimenopause or even at any age, honestly, we could have hormone imbalance, and dates is good for that. Okay, let's try this again. Cancel that. I'm just gonna scrape the sides. So now the whole point of this is just to get it to like a consistency that I could, you know, like shape them into balls. So just gonna do this. It seems to be pretty good. So it's going to be like this, like almost like a cookie. I'm so excited because it doesn't include any cooking or baking or anything. So anyway, and then at the end, I'm going to be adding some chocolate chips and something called cacao nibs. This recipe, honestly, you could use one or the other. It doesn't have to be both. I'm just going to use a combination because I like them both. Chocolate chips, I have the ones that are 70% cacao, and then the cacao nibs are more dense, like just the cacao, you know, so I'm going to kind of get a combination of both. I'm going to add a tiny bit more water to that. And these are going to be a super finish to my meal when I'm looking for something sweet, or a way to fuel myself if I'm going to be doing a long workout. And I'm going to talk about that in a second. Let me actually. And I'm just trying to play around with these different settings. So some people do ask me if they should be taking in food or snacking before their workouts, or if, you know, if you should be working out in a fasted state. And I would say to that, it really depends on, number one, how long you're going to be working out for and how intense the workout is going to be. So if you're going to be working out for more than an hour, then yes, you should absolutely be fueling yourself before the workout. Especially if it's going to be on the more highly intense end. But even endurance workouts, if it's going to be more than an hour, then yes, you should be fueling before and then each hour of the workout. So some people who are doing real ultra workouts, really long endurance workouts and things like that, then yes, fueling is very, very important before and during. If you're going to be working out for less than an hour, then it really depends on who you are. For women, working out in a fasted state, it can be okay if you're really, working on losing a lot of fat tissue and that's your goal. But pay attention to your hormone balance, to your menstrual cycle. If you begin fasting, if you work out in a fasted state for over a long period of time, for many weeks, it could affect your hormone balance. It could, unless you're good, your menstrual cycle is good, your mood is good, and you don't know, and your body's just got used to it, then you can stick with that if it's a workout that's less than an hour. But really pay attention to those symptoms, because women who work out fasted, and if it's very high intense, and if it starts to creep up to an hour, then it could be a little bit too much for your hormones at some point. Men, on the other hand, your hormones is not as much of an issue there, so men can handle working out in a fasted state a little bit better than women. So I think, it's a very individual question, so it's kind of hard to answer, because I would love to get to know exactly your own situation if this is something that you're wondering about. But in a general basic, that's what I would say. If it's more than an hour, yes, fuel. If you're a woman and it's less than an hour, see how intense your workout is going to be and see how you feel over time when you're doing it. If you're a man and it's less than an hour, then you're probably good to go if you want to fast before the workout. But remember too that I said before, when you do have something to eat beforehand and then you work out, your insulin is not going to be triggered, so that's a benefit. So that is helpful to know. And so just like a snack of a little bit of carbohydrate and maybe a little bit of protein is what I would say. So like some nut butter and a banana, or something like one of these energy balls. Okay, so the next part of the recipe was to add my chocolate chips. And I told you I was gonna add a combination of chocolate chips and some nibs. Probably should have added that first because it's a little more messy. So these are what the nibs look like. I'll show you in a second. I told you this is a little more messy. I'm gonna definitely make a mess on the table. Okay, and I actually think I might be better off, you know, taking it out of here and adding the chocolate after. But let me just show you what the nibs are. So it's these really, really crunchy, you can't really eat them. You know, you can, but they're too crunchy and they don't actually taste very good. You probably can't see them too well in there, but they're super crunchy, and they're, you know, when you use them, they definitely have to be blended. You don't just want to like chew on them, but blended. I use them in my smoothies as a way to get that cacao that I told you was really healthy for you, and add the chocolate flavor that I love. Okay, so I'm gonna add the chocolate chips out. I'm gonna take this thing out here. See how this goes. Yeah, this is, you see how it came together as like that, and I'll be able to shape them into balls, and then I'll just add the chocolate to it. Because it's a little too sticky for me to keep blending in here. Okay. All right, there was something else that I was going to, okay, so the other topic I wanted to quickly mention at the end here is why I keep saying that maybe you should take out the white flour and cut out gluten. The question I get all the time is, you know, does everybody have to be gluten-free? You know, what's the problem with gluten? You know, we've been eating bread our whole lives. Why is this a thing? This is what I wanted to explain. So the cultivation of grains and corn, and even the way that we process soy in this country, these are relatively new processes relative to human beings living on Earth. Okay, so we human beings have been eating, you know, animal protein and things that were picked from the earth and nature, and we've eaten those things since humans, you know, evolved way back when. But the agriculture and the cultivation of grains and corn is much more recent. And as people are living longer and starting to develop more chronic conditions that we didn't experience when people didn't live as long, we're starting to realize that over a lifetime of eating these types of foods that are highly processed, that it doesn't impact us in our first 30, 40 years. But when we reach our 50s, our 60s, and our 70s, eating these foods for over that whole lifetime is actually causing more long-term chronic conditions that we didn't realize, we didn't experience when people didn't live as long. So that's why we're starting to find some more new conditions like autoimmunity and, you know, diabetes and heart disease. These things are becoming a lot more prevalent as we're living longer, and we're starting to correlate the connection between some of these foods that are relatively new to the human beings, you know, and realize that there is an association or a correlation between these foods and some of these more chronic conditions that are becoming much more prevalent as people are living longer. So that's why, you know, people are like, oh, well, you know, we ate bread our whole lives, it was never a problem, or, you know, my grandparents never even heard of gluten and they ate bread their whole lives. And a lot of times it's because, you know, they didn't live as long and they didn't develop those long-term autoimmune processes that we are experiencing now that we're living longer. And so the reason that our bodies react to these more recent, you know, types of agricultural foods is because in the process of growing them and then processing them, new compounds are created. So as you know, take a grain from the ground and make it form into the white flour that you see in the supermarket, a protein called gluten is formed in that process. And that gluten is a type of protein that is not found originally in the natural grain that was grown from the ground. It is a new type of protein that our bodies seem to recognize sometimes as a foreign ingredient. And anytime that your body recognizes something as foreign, it will treat it like a germ. It will have this immune or inflammatory response and remove that food, that gluten protein, from your body. Now, your body might be able to have that inflammatory response and all through your 30s and 20s and your teens, and your body can have that inflammatory response over and over and over a whole lifetime, and you could be fine until all of a sudden in your 50s or 60s or later in life, it's enough already. Enough inflammation. We can't handle this anymore. And your body starts to sort of mistake some of your own tissues, your own body cells, for the same shape as that gluten. So every time you eat gluten, not only is your body going to try now to remove the gluten, but all of a sudden it says, your thyroid looks just like this chemical compound in gluten. So now all of a sudden your body is going to react to your thyroid every single time you eat gluten. And the same thing, that's considered the autoimmune process that happens with your thyroid, like Hashimoto's or Graves' disease. If it starts to recognize your skin as the problem, then you would develop something called psoriasis. If it starts to recognize your joints as similar to gluten, then you'll develop something called rheumatoid arthritis, which is a very common condition that many older people are starting to experience. And there's always a trigger for those autoimmune processes. Oftentimes the trigger is gluten, or dairy, or soy, or corn, or one of these types of foods that is relatively new to human beings. So I hope that explains why it's not a problem for everyone. It may not have been a problem for you your whole entire life, but it could begin to become a problem as we get older. And as we develop these autoimmune conditions, it's oftentimes because of a specific food that your body recognizes as foreign. It's causing an inflammatory response, and then along with trying to remove that gluten, your own self-tissue is getting attacked in that same inflammatory response. So you develop these autoimmune processes. The way you can figure out if one of these foods is a problem is by taking a good 3 or 4 week period where you remove those foods completely from your diet, 100% out completely, because even just a little bit of gluten, even if you get it in your skincare or your shampoo, if it's causing an autoimmune process, if it's causing an inflammatory response, just the tiniest bit of that chemical compound in gluten will cause that trigger. So it has to be removed completely for 3 or 4 weeks. And then then at that point, number one, you want to see how you feel. If it's already reduced any of the symptoms that you've experienced previously, then you know that one of those foods was problematic for you. Then if you're very curious and you're dying to add these foods back into your diet and you just can't live without them, then you can go through a reintroduction process where you only reintroduce one thing at a time and you see how your body feels. But it's a very sort of scientifically planned out process. I wouldn't recommend just trying this completely on your own. I would say I'd love to help you through this because there are some nuances that I would say you might need a little bit of help with. So contact me if this is something that you think you're experiencing. If you have an autoimmune condition, for certain, these are things to be thinking about, but this is why these foods can be problematic. It's why I talk about gluten and dairy so much. And you know, certainly it's, you know, I'm just wanted to explain that to you. It's not for everyone, but it's certainly something to keep on your, you know, be aware of as you get older. Okay, so I'm going to add my chocolate chips and my cacao nibs to my raw chocolate energy balls. This is my delicious sweet food for the week. The challenge for you is to adjust one of your sweet, delicious recipes to something that's a little more healthy. That replaces white sugar with another sweetener, that includes healthy ingredients like nuts and seeds and cacao and nut butter, or fruits, berries, bananas, apples, whatever you love. Let me know what that recipe is and send me a picture. I want to see what that looks like. And keep up the great work. We have made it to next week is the last week of the challenge. I am so proud of all of the work that you guys have been doing. I'm really hoping you're starting to notice some physical and mental health benefits. Please let me know if that's happening for you. But have a great week, everybody, and I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.